All right, Book Brass, it's time for a full summary of this book, From Blood and Ash by Jennifer Armentrout, or as I like to call her, Jennifer Handenfish. So let's just start at the beginning and go from there. By the way, spoiler alert. So the book starts off with our main character, whose name is Poppy. It's not her real name, it's a nickname. She's currently veiled up and playing cards with some random dudes. She's also a maiden and is currently in a brothel. So she's not a very good maiden. Anyway, the brothel is called the Black Pearl or something. She also has this magical gift where she can feel people's pain. So she's basically Krista from Fern Gully. She's also never gone heels to heaven with a man. Anyway, at some point she has a conversation with a random lady who knows things. During this conversation, some old dude named Victor that she knows walks in the brothel. Is his last name Crumb? Anyway, she hides from him because he's basically a father figure in her life and she doesn't want him to know that she's in a brothel. She's also curious to know why he's in a brothel too. So she goes and hides in this random room and she runs into a dude named Hawk Flynn. What a name. Before there was Hawk Tooie, there was Hawk Flynn, but he's probably not involved in some pump and dump cryptocurrency, but he is currently trying to pump and dump with Poppy. She also knows who he is from previous encounters, and he knows who she is vaguely, but currently doesn't realize it's her because she, like I said, is veiled up. And then he starts making a move on her because he thinks she's someone else. And she's like, oh, when in Rome, or whatever. So they start kissing. It's actually her first kiss. Oh, really? Did your foot go poppy? Hashtag Mia. Then he realizes that she isn't who he thinks she is. So they chat, and then they flirt. And then they touch. And then they're interrupted by something urgent, like an Amber Alert on your phone during the good part of the movie. And he has to leave to go do something, but before he leaves, he says, hey, you stay, I'll come back. And she's like, oh, totally. And then he leaves and she leaves as well. Then a little bit later, she has a conversation with this chick named Twani about something called the Ascension. Apparently there's a ritual that happens to certain people and then you become what's known as the Ascended, which for some reason made me think of being enlightened. So that's just what we're going to call it now because that's fun for me. It's basically being given to the gods and it's very vague at this point in the story. Anyway, she's due for an enlightenment. Then we cut to Poppy and old Victor Crumb chatting with a sad lady. Apparently her husband caught COVID or something. So Poppy takes away her sadness because apparently she can do that. Which reminds me of the storyline of Hogwarts Legacy. I know this is very niche. Remember that part when the main character chick tries to take away people's pain and it ends up being not good? Anyway, then Poppy goes to look at the husband with COVID. And he's in bed all sick and stuff. And then she kills him. Okay. Should have got vaccinated, buddy. And speaking of vaxxed, this video is brought to you today by Pfizer. Just kidding. But that'd be a good segue, wouldn't it? Then we cut to Poppy chatting with old Victor Crumb about how she's afraid of becoming enlightened. A little bit later, she gets stopped by a dude named Lord Mezzanine or something. Anyway, he's all like, I don't understand boundaries. And he's coming on pretty hard to this young lady. Luckily, they're interrupted by someone screaming. And then they go and find a dead girl. So I guess unlucky for the dead girl. Then sometime later, she starts speculating with some friends, including Twani, about how the dead girl died. Craven, accursed, those are two words that popped up during their conversation. And the Duke thinks it's a dissenter, which honestly just reminded me of Dementor because I'm an idiot and I don't have enough brain power to just have new things in my head. So we'll call them Dementors. And then Poppy becomes Sherlock Holmes and tries to solve the case. And she comes to the conclusion that an Atlantean killed the girl, which I guess is just people from Atlantis. It's not really, but it is fun to say that. And then at one point she's hanging out with a dude that's her guard whose name is Rylan, and he gets an arrow to the heart, like he's Traeger from Onyx Storm who just pulled the wrong gift card, and then he dies. Obviously. So the guy that shot Rylan comes and kidnaps old Popeye. But then she stabs him, and he's about to kill her. But then somebody whistles from a nearby forest like he's that blue arrow-wielding dude from Guardians of the Galaxy. So the guy scampers off. So I guess we're good now? Other than the guy that just died, I guess. Later, she has a conversation with someone called the Duchess. The Duchess tells her that she believes it's an Atlantean that's doing all this stuff. And Popeye's like, yeah, I already know that. And then the Duchess tells Popsicle that she believes the Dark One is trying to come get her. The Dark One? Really? You couldn't have picked a more, I don't know, original title for the evil guy? We'll go with it. Then blah, 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 lots of talking. Then we cut to the funeral of Arrow Boy. Rylan is his name. Also, Hawk Tooie Boy is there as well. But apparently he doesn't recognize Popsicle. But again, that's because she was veiled up in their last conversation. Then we cut to some training. Then some rando family comes and has a conversation with the Duke. Their names are the Tulises. And they're asking that their third son not take part in what's called the Great Rite because their first two sons died. And the Duke is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't. Who cares? We're taking him anyway. Also, how crazy is it that their name is Tooless when they literally have two less kids? Apparently this great rite is where you give people to the gods and the gods save people from what's called the mist. Whatever. It's giving religious cult. Then at one point, Popeye gets called before the Duke. Hawk Tui Boy is there, and apparently he is going to be her new guard because, the other one died. So the Duke tells her, hey, remove your veil so Hawk Tui Boy can see you. So she does. By the way, one whole side of her face is apparently very scarred up. Important detail, I guess. And the Duke is like, look how ugly this chick is, eh? And Hawk Tui Boy is like, no, she's perfect to me. So now he's her personal guard. A little bit later, Popeye tells Tuani what she and Hawk Tui Boy did together in the brothel. And she's like, you're such a skank. Give me the details. And then we learn that the Dark One's name is Castile. All right. And the first thing I thought of was Blue Steel from Zoolander. Because I'm an idiot. Also, you're not supposed to call him by his real name. Okay, Voldemort. Then Poppy gets summoned to chat with the Duke and Mezzanine Man, or whatever his name is. Hawk Tui Boy takes her to meet with him, and when she gets there, they tell her that she's in trouble. They didn't like the way she looked at them, or something. Anyway, her punishment is to go to Raising Cane's, and I don't mean the chicken fast food restaurant. Get it? Because he beats her with a cane. Later, the castle gets attacked by what's called the Mist, and these creatures called Cravens are in it. They're called that because they be craven killing. And Popeye's first thought was, I'm gonna go out there. Okay, generic white person from every horror movie. Anyway, she runs out there and starts killing a bunch of them because apparently she's a boss queen. And then she runs into Hawk Tui Boy. And they have this stereotypical moment of girl fights with guy that seems to happen often in these books. Not really sure why that's the case. Maybe it's just like this weird power for dominance. Anyway, they fight for a little bit. Then he lets her go back to her room. But he comes in later. Not that kind of comes, you freaking heathens. I mean, he walks into her room later and nothing happens, okay? Anyway, they have this long conversation about love, life, and the pursuit of happiness, or whatever. Then he leaves. And I'll tell you what, the dialogue between Popeye and Hawk Tui Boy is pretty good. Then there's some more talking between other characters, blah, blah, blah. And later, the Duke gives a speech to a bunch of people. But there's this blonde dude in the crowd, right? And he yells out, I'll give you a hand, and throws the hand of a craven at the Duke. And then he shouts out, from blood and ash, we will rise. And I'm thinking the whole time, book title. Anyway, then they grab him. A little bit later, Popeye has a conversation with the Duchess, and she tells Popeye that the previous maiden was killed by the Dark One. And then we cut to Popeye reading out loud from a history book in front of the priest, Hawk Tui Boy, and whoever else is there, which just reminded me of having to read aloud in class in middle school. Remember that trauma? Anyway, Popeye mispronounces a word, and the priest gets onto her. But then Hawk Tui Boy steps up and says, actually, no, she said it right. I like you, sir. And then at some point, the priest tries to slap Poppy, but Hawk Tui Boy stops the hand, and I'm like, oh, smash. And it seems like nothing's going to happen to them for that. And that makes me curious. Then Hawkish Delight has a conversation with Popeye a little bit later, and we find out that he's a really good guy. And I'm thinking, what kind of game are you playing, sir? And then we cut to Poppy standing on a ledge outside a window, eavesdropping on the Duke and some guard because she tried to steal a book from the restricted section. She hears them talk about the blonde-headed dude that shouted earlier, and then they leave the room, and then she hears Hawk Tui Boy say, you all right out there? So he helps her out, says all the right things, and I'm thinking, what is the catch with you? And then we cut to what they call the Great Rite, which is also my wife's name, because apparently she's never wrong. But Popeye and Hawk Tui Boy break away from the crowd. And this part of the book is freaking adorable. He says all the right things. There's this connection type moment. The banter between them is great. It reminds me of like young love in high school where it's new and you're like, I don't even know what to do, but I like the fact that I'm here. Man stuff. Anyway, then their mouths have a meeting, but they end up stopping before going too far because Maiden, whatever. Then old Victor Crumb catches them and he yells at them like he's their dad. But then Hawk Tui Boy stands up to him and I'm thinking, okay, well, we know who Daddy is. Anyway, then he leaves and Victor takes Poppy back to the castle. And when they get there, they find the Duke dead. Apparently the rod he used to beat her with has been shoved through his chest. And there's a note written in blood on the back wall like this is Ginny Weasley helping the basilisk in Chamber of Secrets. Anyway, the note says, from blood and ash we will rise. And I'm thinking the whole time, book title. And then the castle gets attacked and a bunch of people die. And it's pretty gruesome. Wow. Then Popeye, old Victor Crumb, and 20 escape. They're also with the Duchess and Mezzanine Man. And they go to this little area. While they're down there, a Dementor stabs old Victor Crumb, and he just dies. But not before he tells Popeye to forgive him because he failed her. Hawk Tuohy shows up, kills the Dementor, and then Popeye goes crazy and starts slicing body parts off of Mezzanine Man like she's King Arthur with that Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So now Mezzanine Man is dead. And in pieces. And then Popeye passes out. And then we cut to some time later. She's been being lazy in her room, eating buckets of ice cream and watching The Notebook or something. And then she's summoned by the Duchess and is told to go to some area now because it's unsafe where they currently are. Also, the Maiden is a very important character in this story and they're trying to protect her. Probably should have said that earlier. The Duchess also tells her that she's not going to be punished for killing Lord Mezzanine because, you know, sometimes things happen in heated moments. So her and Hawk Tuohy Boy set off to go to the safe place. And they meet some other people along the way that go with them. And then they have a conversation about large rodents that eat people. And my first thought was, do they look like capybaras? Because those are terrifying creatures that some people call cute for some stupid reason. And then they pass through this place called the Blood Forest, which is my wife's nickname for a certain area once a month. I can't use that. And then they all pass through this place called the Blood Forest. And it's terrible and awful and filled with dead things and blood. So they should probably just go through this place as fast as possible, right? But instead they make camp. What in the generic horror movie? Y'all are gonna die. While they're at camp, Hawk Tuohy Boy shows Popeye his fiddling skills by playing a little tune under the sheets. And the next day they get rushed by evil capybaras. And then the Cravens attack. And they kill this dude named Arak who was traveling with them. And Popeye takes his pain as he dies. A little bit later they stop in this little town, they chat with a few people. And Hawk finds out that Poppy has the gift of feeling people's emotions. Then Hawkness and Popsicle smash. Later, one of the people traveling with them takes Poppy aside and says, hey, I don't think you can trust Hawk Tuohy Boy. Oh, there's also this dude named Kieran traveling with them. He's more important in later books. Anyway, the dude tells Popeye that there's something off about Hawk Tuohy Boy. Yeah, no crap. He's freaking perfect. So he says, hey, I'm gonna help you escape. Then they run into Kieran and the dude stabs him. And then Kieran goes all Professor Lupin and turns into a freaking werewolf in front of them. They're actually called Wolven. Same difference. I guess the guard, whose name was Phillips, by the way, was right. And then the creature that killed Popeye's first guard shows up. Uh-oh. But then Hawk Tuohy Boy shows up. Yay! But then he kills the guard that's trying to help Poppy. Back to oh no. So apparently Hawk Tuohy is a bad guy after all and was working with the enemies. There's the catch. There had to be one. You can't be that freaking perfect. And then they take Popeye as prisoner. And then Hawk Tuohy Boy gives Popeye a history lesson. He's basically saying, we're not the bad guys, they're the bad guys. Like this is some sort of American political debate. Basically, we learn that the enlightened ascended people are vampires, which sounds like a vampire who still lives with their parents. Then a little bit later, while Popeye is alone, some people come in and try to kill her, including the creature that killed her first guard. And she almost dies. Then she's able to suck on Hawk. Wait, let me take that again. But then Hawk gives her some of his blood to suck on to give her life. There we go. Long story short, she gets healed. And then he tells her that his real name is Castile. More like Castile my heart. Anyway, he's actually the dark one. And then she stabs him in the heart. Slay. And then he bites her. Hey. And then they bang. Okay. Then there's some more conversations. Castile and Popeye are flirt fighting. And then Hawk Steel nails the people that tried to kill Popeye to the wall. Also, Mr. Two-less was one of those people. Unfortunately. Maybe his wife should change her name to Three-less now. And then we find out that Popeye is part Atlantean. Whatever that means. Then Hawk Steel says that he's going to marry her and the book ends. Long story short. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this book, surprisingly. It was a little bit slower and very dialogue heavy, but I like the dialogue. It seemed to flow well. It sounded like real conversations. But I kind of wanted a slow start to a new series because I just got out of Throne of Glass. I thought it was well written. I thought the action sequences were pretty good. Overall, I liked the book. So I'm going to give it 4 stars. And stay tuned for the next video.